Legacies of historical globalization. Let's talk about it. But first, let's talk about something called decolonization. You should see this in your partial notes. So we have learned about colonization, right? Colonization happens when one country creates a colony in the territory that is already inhabited by another group of people. Decolonization happens when the people who are living in that colony get their independence. They decide that they don't want to be part of the empire anymore. And in some way, they break free from the empire and they form an independent country. Okay, so that is decolonization, when a colony of any empire becomes independent, right? So you guys know that Canada used to be a colony of the British Empire. Well, it was many different colonies of the British Empire. And then in 1867, Canada in some ways, gained its independence from Great Britain and broke away from the British Empire in some ways, and started to sort of make decisions for itself and became less a part of the British Empire, but still actually maintained pretty close ties with the British Empire for a pretty long time. Anyway, so let's walk through the different phases of colonization. Starting in 1492, when Columbus made that first contact in the Americas. As we go through these different versions of the map, any part of the map that is colored is part of an empire. Okay, so you see in yellow, you see the Spanish Empire. Well, right now it's just Spain. Right in green, you see the Portuguese Empire. Well, it's just Portugal and some small parts of Africa. Right in blue, you see the French Empire. Well, at this point in time, it's only France. However, by 1550, you can see that the Spanish and the Portuguese have created some colonies in the Americas. And also you can see that the Portuguese have expanded their empire in small parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. And then by 1660, you can see that the British and the French have established colonies in North America. And you can see that other countries have established just small little footholds in Africa and in South Asia and Southeast Asia. By 1754, you can see that the Americas have come under further control of European empires. However, Africa and Asia still, for the most part, are independent of European control, right? And then by 1822, you start to see some of those countries in the Americas have now gotten their independence. They are not part of European empires anymore. They have decolonized. Meanwhile, in Africa and Asia, most parts of Africa and Asia have not yet been colonized, right? So now at this point in time, by 1822, the first wave of imperialism, which was mostly in the Americas, is now complete. By 1885, you can see that Europe sets its eyes on Africa and Asia. And by 1914, all of Africa, well, almost all of Africa has been colonized, and most of South Asia and East Asia have been colonized as well. But by 1938, some of those countries start to gain their independence. By 1959, more Asian and African countries gained their independence. They decolonized. By 1974, most parts of the world have decolonized. And then 2008, you can see most of those colonies are now independent. Okay, so when these European countries colonized other parts of the world, they left behind legacies. They changed those places in many different ways. So we've learned about Africa. Well, if you take a look at the blue part of Africa, or it might look kind of purple in the video, that part of Africa was colonized by the French. Well, if you go to those parts of Africa today, the national languages for many of those African countries is still French, right? Even though they have gained their independence. And many of them have political systems that are based on the French political system. So they would have like a president, right? In the same way that the French have a president. They would have a republic in the same way that the French have a republic. Okay. And if you go to some of these brown colored countries here, many of them now operate in a similar way to Britain, right? They might have like a parliamentary democracy. And in some of these countries, uh, some of the business elite might still speak English in order to maintain contacts with the English speaking world. And those are legacies, right? And similar stories in Africa, right? If you take a look at this map of Africa, or Africa, Asia, if you look at this map of Asia, it gives you an idea in which country, or sorry, in which year those countries gained their independence from European control. And many of these countries, they still maintain some element of like, some legacies of their rule by the Europeans. Okay, so what are legacies of historical globalization? Well, these are, as it says in your notes, impacts of historical globalization that still affect people's lives today, right? And in your notes, it asks for some examples. Well, here are some examples: language, migration, depopulation, political structures, and borders. So we talked a little bit about language. Another one is migration, right? If you take a look at here, Canada, uh, colonialism in Canada led to a lot of people migrating to Canada from Europe, right? So if you walk around many parts of Canada, you're going to see a lot of people who are white, a lot of people whose ancestors were European, and that happened because of colonialism, right? So this is a legacy that has been left behind by colonialism. Europeans colonized this part of the world, and so you see a lot of people whose ancestors were European. And then depopulation is another big one, right? Depopulation, as we learned, one part of the world that was affected by depopulation in a big way was the Americas, right? So if you go through much of the Americas, there are fewer indigenous people than you would expect there to be, right? And one part of the reason for that is because of Europeans bringing diseases with them into the colonies of the Americas. Political structures. Many parts of the world today have political structures. They have types of governments that are based on European types of governments, right? So Europeans, everywhere they went, well, not everywhere, but most parts of the colonies that they established, when the Europeans left, they usually left behind forms of democracies that were based on their own democracy. And then also borders. Many of these borders, most of these borders, were established by European colonists. So here we'll take a look at Africa, right? So here's a map of Africa that you've probably never seen before. This is a map that is based on the different ethnic groups, the different tribes of Africa. However, these are not the official borders of Africa, right? Instead, the borders changed, and they were made by Europeans, right? Much of those borders, or many of those borders, were actually made in the Berlin Conference of 1884, right? So Africa, here's another version of the different ethnic groups and linguistic groups in Africa. This would be it right here. So Africa should maybe look like this, right? If there was no European colonization, maybe the borders of Africa would have looked more like this. However, because Africa was colonized by Europeans, eventually the borders ended up looking like this. And in some cases, in most cases in Africa, countries were put together by Europeans. And so you have different ethnic groups, people of different religions, people of different languages who are now grouped together randomly into these new countries. And now they have to learn to work together, and they have to learn to operate their new countries, even though these countries are not really necessarily like a natural way of putting these people together. Okay. All right. So you guys are going to do a little bit of reading for this lesson. You have this chart in your notes, and in your chart, you have different legacies of historical globalization: language, migration, displacement, and depopulation. You are going to read pages 146 and 149. These were a handout in class. However, if you are watching this video, you are probably not in class. And so you probably want to find out how to access this handout. So let's see, if you go to D2L, click on resources, click on content, click on textbook, and then where it says TB, Africa, India, and legacies, we're looking for the legacies part. Okay, oh, you can't see anything that I just did. Oops, okay, here, I need to bring it over here. There we go, now you can see. All right, so resources, content, and then textbook, here where it says TB, Africa, India, and legacies, you click on that one, and now we're looking for page 146. So we scroll down, 146, where are you? Go a little further. That looks like page 146. So you're going to read pages 146, 147, 148, and 149. You can do it. And as you are reading, you are looking for examples of each type of legacy. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So you read through these pages and find one example of one particular country in which language is a legacy of imperialism. Okay, so do your reading. Okay, oh, in this country, this language is spoken by many people, and this language is spoken by those people because of imperialism. Okay, it's a legacy of imperialism. Okay, then you move on to the next one, migration. Explain, okay, in which country was migration a legacy of imperialism? And go through the list, and you're just writing down examples. In your answers, in your sentences that you write, include things like who, where, and why, right? So who now lives with this legacy of historical globalization? Where, right? So like say in which country or which continent this is taking place, and why? Why did this happen? Okay, so you go through that chart and write out some sentences in that chart. And once you've done that, that'll be everything. All right, good work, good luck, and have a good day.